somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit. Beyond the last remnants of human civilization, something vast and terrible lurked in the dark. A presence, a shadow that had no business being there. Admiral Elias Griffin stood on the bridge of the EDF. Vengeance. His fingers wrapped tightly around the railing as the holographic display flickered with unsettling clarity. The data was irrefutable. A fleet was closing in. He exhaled, slow and steady. He had seen war before, but this was something different.
"This doesn't make sense,"
murmured Lieutenant Anna Voss, her voice tight. She was staring at the tactical screen, at the countless crimson blips moving in perfect synchronization, like a swarm of mechanical locusts. They're not even hesitating. They think we're nothing, just another nameless species to subjugate. They're not wrong about one thing, Griffin said, his voice grim but steady. We've made sure they think we're weak. Anna shot him a sharp look, then exhaled in understanding. For centuries, humanity had played a dangerous game, hiding in plain sight, downplaying its capabilities, and broadcasting only the most primitive versions of its technology to the galactic community. While other species fought for dominance, Earth watched. And now, the waiting was over. A chime rang out, a transmission request. "Incoming message," the comms officer announced. "It's them." "Put it through," Griffin said. The bridge went silent as the screen shifted, and the face of Overlord Psychor of the Jarnax Empire appeared. His scaled face twisted in what could only be described as amusement. "Humans," the alien rasped, his voice thick with condescension. "I am Overlord Psychor of the Jarnax Dominion. Your world is now the property of the Empire. Surrender immediately. You will serve as a workforce under our guidance. Don't try to resist." Griffin leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You're in Sol space." Psychor chuckled, a deep, guttural sound. Space is owned by those strong enough to take it. Griffin's lips quirked upward, but his eyes were ice. "You know what's funny about that?" Psychor's slitted eyes narrowed. "You came here expecting a slaughter. You think we're another weak race? Another pathetic civilization clinging to its dirtball planet. And for the longest time, we wanted you to think that." Psychor blinked. "Explain yourself, primate." Griffin's expression didn't change. He simply lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. Across the solar system, hidden defense platforms deactivated their cloaking fields, revealing weapons that should not exist. The once outdated human warships shimmered as hard light camouflage dissolved, exposing sleek, predatory hulls bristling with technologies the galaxy had never seen. The Earth Defense Fleet suddenly moved in a way that defied all known tactics, executing precision maneuvers with ruthless efficiency. And then, the first human act was fired, bypassing shields and armor as if they weren't there. The Jarnax flagship shuddered violently, entire sections of its hull vanishing into nothingness, as though they had never existed. Psychor's amusement vanished. What have you done?" he roared, his image flickering as his flagship struggled to compensate for the damage. Griffin straightened his uniform, his voice cool and sharp. "Welcome to the real Earth Defense Force," he said. "You wanted a fight? You just got one." And across the void of space, humanity, silent, patient, and unforgiving. Psychor's face flickered on the holoscreen, his slitted eyes wide with disbelief. His war doctrine, the one that had crushed 1,000 civilizations, had never accounted for this. Never imagined that a species so unassuming, so seemingly primitive. His mandibles quivered, his scaled hands curled into fists. This is impossible," he growled. Admiral Elias Griffin watched him with a measured stare, unshaken, calm as an ocean before a storm. "Impossible?" he echoed. "You really thought we'd let just anyone walk into our system and plant their flag?" His voice was quiet, laced with something just beneath the surface, something cold, something hungry. "You underestimated us, Psychor. And that's the last mistake you'll ever make." Before the Overlord could spit a retort, the first wave hit. The silent void of space erupted. Human warships once thought laughably outdated, now moved with terrifying precision, warping through the darkness in perfect synchronization. Weapons that had never been recorded in any known database lit up the void, weapons that defied the very laws of physics. A Jarnax battlecruiser, 3 kilometers of reinforced alloy and quantum shielding, buckled under the first impact. The energy shielding, designed to withstand, shattered. The hull buckled inward as a rupture, leaving a jagged hole where its engines had been. The crew inside never had time to scream. Shikor staggered back from his command chair, staring at the impossible carnage flashing across his monitors. "Admiral," a Jarnax officer shrieked, his talons digging into the console. "They're weapons. Our scanners can't even analyze them. They're phasing in and out of known space." A second explosion rocked the fleet and another Jarnax dreadnought. For the first time in his long, merciless career, Overlord Psychor felt fear. Griffin didn't smile. His expression was a mask of cold inevitability. "I wonder," he mused, his voice almost idle, almost casual. "How many of your conquests fought back like this?" His gaze flickered toward the tactical display, where human ships moved. Or did they all just roll over? Shikor bared his teeth. "You dare challenge the Jarnax Empire? You don't get it, do you?" Griffin's voice dropped to a whisper, his words like a blade sliding between ribs. "We wanted this." His fingers traced a slow, deliberate line across his console, his voice unhurried, but dripping with finality. "We've been waiting for something like you." Then he nodded. "Send the next phase." Across the battlefield, Anna Voss was already in position, hidden among the chaos. Inside a specially designed stealth vessel, she sat hunched over her console, fingers flying across the holographic interface. Lines of alien code scrolled past her eyes at a speed no ordinary human could follow. But she wasn't ordinary. She had spent the last 6 years preparing for this exact moment, studying, infiltrating, and learning every weakness in the Jarnax war network. And now, she was inside. The enemy's communications, their command relays, their weapon controls. Anna exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She was about to end this war before it truly began. "Phase 2 is a go," she whispered. "Disrupting systems now." At that moment, across the entire Jarnax armada, something went very, very wrong. Alarms shrieked. Control panels glitched, their once perfect symphony of tactical data turning into a garbled mess of static and human-scripted interference. Engines stuttered. Targeting systems blinked out of existence. Shields flickered, leaving billions of credits worth of war machines exposed and vulnerable. The Jarnax fleet, unstoppable conquerors of 100 worlds, was now blind, deaf, and helpless. Shikor knew, in that instant, that they had lost. And then Griffin's voice came over the transmission, low and unshakable. "You came here expecting prey?" Psychor. His gaze was hard, unwavering. "Instead, you walked into the hunting ground of the only species that has spent its entire existence learning how to cope with things bigger than itself. And then, with accuracy, humanity unleashed the full force of its wrath." Shikor could no longer hear the sounds of his crew over the chaos that consumed the bridge. Every screen flashed with damage reports. Every alarm shrieked like the dying screams of his once invincible armada. But now, for the first time in the Empire's history, his fight doctrine had failed. And it wasn't failing because of superior numbers or sheer brute force. It was failing because they had never prepared for an enemy like this. The humans weren't fighting for territory. They weren't fighting for conquest. They were fighting as if nothing else in the universe mattered. "Sir, we—" The officer at the control station barely got the words out before the ship lurched violently, throwing him across the deck. Sparks exploded from an overhead console, bathing the command center in a sickly red glow. Shikor struggled to his feet, his mind racing. "How are they doing this?" His eyes darted across the tactical display. The entire formation was losing. Jarnax dreadnoughts useless. Their shields non-existent. Their weapons hacked, malfunctioning, or simply gone. Sikor's breath came short and ragged as he finally understood. This wasn't just some lucky victory. This wasn't just humans having a few unexpected advantages. Across the void, Elias Griffin stood on the bridge of the EDF. Vengeance. Hands folded behind his back, his expression grim. The tactical display showed everything. Every struggling enemy ship. Every moment of slow, creeping desperation from the Jarnax fleet. "This is it." Anna Voss's voice came through his earpiece. She was still deep in the enemy network, her mind moving faster than any machine, threading through layers of security like a phantom. Their flagship is still operational, but their command network is affected. If we act now, it's over. Griffin didn't blink. "Then let's finish this." Anna smirked through the comms. "Thought you'd say that." Then, with one final keystroke, she acted, and the entire Jarnax fleet shut down. Shikor's heart stopped as his flagship went dark. The power core flickered. The lights died. The engines cut out, leaving them drifting, defenseless. The bridge was silent except for the panicked breaths of his officers, their talons gripping useless control panels. Then, one by one, the human ships appeared. They weren't cloaked. They weren't hidden. They had been waiting, lingering just beyond detection, watching, circling. One of them, larger than the rest, pulled ahead, its sleek black hull reflecting the distant light of Sol. And then, a transmission opened. Griffin's face appeared, expressionless. "You're done." His voice was calm, final. "You surrender." Sikor bared his teeth, his pride screaming for him to fight, to refuse. But when he looked out at the void, when he saw what was coming, he knew we're just outmatched. Sikor's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair, his breathing ragged, his mind racing through 1,000 battle scenarios, none of them ended with victory. His ships, his empire's pride, hung lifeless in the abyss, either adrift or knocked down by a species that shouldn't have been capable of this. Griffin's voice crackled through the broken silence, his words as calm as a throat. "Your move, Overlord." Sikor's mandibles twitched. His kind had ruled through strength, through conquest, through the sheer, unrelenting inevitability of their empire. They had enslaved billions, reducing entire civilizations to footnotes in history. Never once had they faced an enemy who wasn't afraid. Never once had they encountered a species that met them with something worse than defiance, certainty. His officers looked to him, waiting for orders. But their eyes, once filled with the fire of conquest, now held only fear. They had seen too much. The way the humans moved, the way their weapons rewrote reality, the way they fought as if war was their natural state. But Sikor wasn't ready to surrender. He forced his voice steady. "You think this is over, human?" He bared his fangs, forcing the last remnants of his pride into his words. "You think we will bow?" Griffin's expression didn't change. "I think you'll lose." And then, before Sikor could issue an order, the void around him cracked open. For a fleeting moment, Sikor thought reinforcements had come, some secret weapon of the Empire, but then he saw the shapes emerge. They were human. Sleek, featureless black hulls shifted as if they weren't made of metal, but something alive. These ships didn't register on his scanners. They didn't cast reflections. They drank the light around them, moving in a way that made his stomach churn. A pulse rippled through the battlefield, but it made no sound. Instead, the stars themselves bent, space twisting, the fabric of reality shuddering as 3 of the last Jarnax warships simply ceased to exist. Sikor stared in horror, a choked sound escaping his throat. What are they?" For the first time since the battle began, Griffin smiled. "Those are the weapons we chose not to use." Sikor's breath hitched. His mind rebelled against the thought, against the sheer implication of those words. A trembling officer at his side whispered, "Sir, we can't win." His voice cracked. "We have to surrender." Sikor's claws twitched. His pride, his legacy, his entire empire balanced on the edge of. But as he looked into the void, his mandibles clenched, his talons curled into fists, and with a slow, shaking breath, Overlord Sikor lowered his head. The bridge of the Jarnax flagship, once filled with the orchestrated chaos of war, now stood eerily still. The glow of shattered displays cast a dim light over the faces of Sikor's officers, their once unshakable resolve reduced to dust. The war was over. Sikor's talons trembled as he pressed the transmission key. His voice, once laced with arrogance and fury, was empty.
"This is Overlord Sikor of the Jarnax Empire,"
he said, the words choking him as they left his mandibles.
"We surrender."
A stillness stretched across the battlefield as if the entire universe had been holding its breath, waiting for those words. And then, with cold precision, the human fleet stood down, weapons powered down. The experimental units, those unnatural things, folded back into the void like shadows retreating from the light. The sky, once filled with devastation, now hung quiet. On the bridge of the EDF, Vengeance, Admiral Elias Griffin exhaled, but his shoulders remained squared, his expression unreadable. He had expected this moment, had prepared for it, yet he felt nothing, because this had never been about victory. This had been about teaching a lesson. Anna Voss's voice came through the comms, quiet, unreadable. "He actually said it." "He did," Griffin murmured, his eyes never leaving the screen where Sikor's defeated face remained.
but he doesn't understand yet.
He pressed the transmission key.
Overlord,
he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Your empire will withdraw from every world it has ever conquered. Your forces will return home and never raise arms against another species again. You will submit to the terms of the Galactic Council and stand trial for your crimes, and in return, we will let you live. Sikor's mandibles twitched, desperate to refuse. But he had seen what Griffin was willing to unleash. He had seen what humanity had held back. He knew they weren't bluffing.
you demand too much,
Sikor rasped. Griffin's expression didn't change. We could demand everything. For a moment, the Overlord didn't answer. Then, slowly, painfully, he bowed his head lower. We accept, he whispered. Across the battlefield, human ships began transmitting the surrender to every known system, broadcasting it not just to the Galactic Council, but to every species in the galaxy. The message was clear. The war had ended before it had truly begun, and humanity had emerged unchallenged. Sicor knew that even if the Jarnax Empire survived, it would never be the same. They would never rule again. The fear had been etched into their bones, into the very fabric of their existence, and they would never forget. As the transmission cut, Griffin turned away from the screen. The bridge was silent, every officer watching him. He could see it in their faces, the unspoken weight of what they had just done. They had changed the galaxy. Anna stood at his side, arms crossed, her voice low. Think they'll ever try again? Griffin's gaze flicked back to the void where the remnants of the Jarnax fleet limped away, shadows of their former glory. No, he said. They won't. She studied him. And the rest of the galaxy? Griffin let out a slow breath, his hands folding behind his back as he stared into the vast, infinite dark. They'll learn, he said. As the human fleet turned for home, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, one final message was sent to every star, every system, and every world that had ever doubted what humanity was capable of. We did not seek war, but we will never run from it. Remember this day. Remember what you saw. And never, ever mistake our kindness for weakness again.